KSI versus Dillon Danis, March 29th.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am fighting Dillon Danis. And then several times, but this time, you won't be rude.
You're a bitch.
I'm a bitch. Come on, yo, best believe, January 14th, you're finished.
Everyone expects KSI to show up, dominate, and add another knockout to his record. I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls out. Why? Because the truth about KSI's boxing career is something no one talks about. His power? Overrated. His knockouts? Fake hype. The media? Full of his employees who won't say a word, and his biggest weapon, his mindset, is gone. I'm about to break it all down, but first, let's talk about the illusion of KSI's power. Old fights and overrated power and skill. Look, KSI just isn't that good at boxing. No joke.
There's so much heat. AJ's aggression is too much. I doubt.
This dude is everywhere. It's like you go for something and he just starts flinging his arms everywhere.
And who is going to win? Jay seems to be carrying the confidence and he's coming forward. JJ just sort of, whoa.
I'm telling you, if he hits me with one of those, yo, my head's flying off.
Oh, he's on him. He's throwing the hooks. It's down at the back.
The way you were swinging, some of them punches.
I was moving like wilder, fam.
There's a thought process behind it now. At this point, they're both going to be getting tired. Vitalize, full of energy. Oh, shots! He's got Logan on the move.
Back comes our next round.
He's never been some natural-born fighter, but people still act like his first fight with Joe Weller was some masterclass. Was it really, though? This was probably the only time KSI actually looked somewhat technical in the ring. But let's be honest, that was more about Joe falling apart than KSI being great. KSI had experience performing on big stages, so the bright lights didn't affect him. But Joe? He had never been in that kind of environment before, and it showed. He completely froze. And let's talk about that stoppage, because this is where the KSI hype really starts to fall apart. Did he drop Joe? Did he even rock him? Not really. Joe just shelled up and stopped throwing back, and the ref had no choice but to step in. He was still on his feet when the fight ended. He never even went down. At that point, he had mentally checked out and wasn't punching back, so the referee stopped it to prevent him from taking unnecessary damage. And let's be real, there was no way Joe was winning at that point anyway. So, what does that say about KSI's power? People love to talk about how strong he is, but where was that knockout? He didn't put Joe to sleep. He didn't even drop him. He just overwhelmed a guy who wasn't fighting back. If this was KSI's best performance, then what does that really say about him? Transition to next fight. Now, maybe you're thinking I'm just a KSI hater or being too critical, but let's be real. If KSI is this powerhouse everyone claims he is, then surely he dominated Logan Paul, right? Well, let's take a look. KSI versus Logan Paul won. KSI's power? Overrated. His skill? Questionable. And this fight proved it. KSI had every advantage. More experience, better conditioning, zero pressure. Logan? No fights, no real training, and the entire world against him. He was the villain. The world was rooting for him to be beat after the suicide forest. Logan was coming off one of the most hated incidents in YouTube history.
It's been tough. Ironically, I'm being told to millions of people literally telling me they hate me to go die in a fire. It's like the most horrible, horrific things.
1 month ago, the social media superstar with over 16 million YouTube subscribers was at the top of his game, breaking records with his wild viral video.
I hit myself in the face again.
That is, until he posted a clip from his visit to Japan. What happened next would change his life forever. In an instant, he was met with fierce backlash.
Logan was the underdog in every sense of the word. He should have been an easy win. But what happened? From the start, Logan dominated. He was bigger, stronger, and completely outclassed KSI in the first 2 rounds. Logan, who was naturally athletic from years of sports and wrestling, came out fast, taunted KSI. The dude had no business looking that good. I couldn't do anything. But Logan was inexperienced, and by round 3, he started to gas. That's when KSI finally had success. Not because of skill, but because Logan couldn't keep up the pace. Round 4, Logan's defense started slipping. His power was gone. KSI took over, landing shots, but still couldn't drop or really rock him. Then, in round 5, Logan caught his second wind and went right back to dominating. When he had energy, He wiped the floor with KSI. That's the pattern. Whenever Logan had anything left in the tank, KSI had nothing for him. But then came round 6. Logan was completely gassed. His punches had nothing on them, his defense and output was gone, and just like Joe Weller, he shelled up and became a punching bag. And that's when KSI finally looked dominant, when his opponent stopped fighting back. Yet even with all that, KSI still couldn't put him away. And the final result, KSI Barley scraped a draw. After everything in his favor, KSI couldn't even win.
After 6 rounds of action, we go to the scorecards. Referee Gareth Morris scores it 58-57. Our next judge has it even at 57-57. Judge has it 57-57. It is a majority draw.
It's a draw.
And yet, people act like this fight proved he's a powerhouse because of nearly stopping Logan in the same way as Joe in round 6. How? He had all the experience, all the advantages. He should have went through him like a hot knife through butter. Instead, he barely survived against a guy having his first fight ever. Transition to rematch. What happens when Logan actually trains? When he fixes his gas tank? If KSI struggled this much against a version of Logan that had no idea what he was doing, how do you think the rematch played out? Because this time, Logan was coming in prepared, and everything was about to change, but for the wrong reasons. This was supposed to be the fight where KSI proved he was levels above Logan Paul. No more excuses. He had more experience. He had already fought Logan before, and now it was a pro fight. No headgear, full stakes. Instead of looking better, KSI somehow looked worse. Right from the start, Logan crumbled under the pressure. He went from a confident, dominant fighter in their first match to completely shutting down. He barely threw anything, afraid of gassing out again, and for 95% of the fight, he only used his left hand. He was so hesitant that he mirrored Joe Weller, shelling up, barely throwing back, and turning into yet another punching bag for KSI. Should have been easy for JJ, but instead of capitalizing, KSI looked like a mess. He was sloppy, wild, and out of shape, swinging the hardest and widest he ever had, with no technique, no accuracy, and no footwork. And yet, because Logan wasn't doing anything, KSI managed to get his first career knockdown. But let's be real, it wasn't power, it wasn't skill. Logan tripped, lost his balance, and hit the canvas. He got up instantly, unfazed. For the first 3 rounds, that was the fight. KSI swinging and missing. Logan standing there, too scared to throw. But then, in round 4, Logan finally let his right hand go. And with the first real punch he threw all night, KSI went down hard. This wasn't some flash knockdown or a lucky off-balance shot. KSI was rocked. Even when he got up, he was wobbling around the ring. Logan had just exposed the difference in power between them. Then came the controversy.
For hitting him when he was down. 2 points! Scoring, and then 2 points.
The ref took away 2 points from Logan. A decision that literally gave KSI the win, because despite Logan barely throwing, despite fighting with one hand, KSI still couldn't get him out of there. And when it went to the scorecards,
scores the contest 56-55. He has it for Logan Paul. 57-54. He scores it for KSI. Scores the contest 56-55. To the winner by split decision, the United Kingdom, the Nightmare,
KSI scraped a split decision victory on a technicality, and that was it. KSI retired. No talk of fighting the best, no plans to improve. He was done. At least until he saw Jake Paul's success. 3 years later, after countless videos saying he was still training, still improving, and that Jake was full of weaknesses he could exploit.
But best believe, when I get in that ring, I'm knocking him out, okay? Fully knocking him out. I've changed a few things in my camp to ensure my victory, okay? And your boy's gonna come through different, man. So different. I will be fighting Jake, especially after I finish, you know, smashing the music scene. And I'm done with this music thing. You're gonna get your piece, okay? You'll get your piece, best believe.
After 3 years out of the ring, KSI finally made his return. But this wasn't just any comeback. This was supposed to be the new KSI, one who had spent years in the gym, bringing in new trainers, crafting a whole new style, and preparing for one goal, beating Jake Paul. At least that's what he said. Because in those 3 years while Jake Paul was actually fighting real competition, knocking out athletes, world-class wrestlers, and MMA champions, KSI was on the sidelines, criticizing Jake's opponents for being easy fights. So when KSI finally announced his big return, people expected a statement. Someone big, someone who proved he was levels ahead of Jake. And then the name dropped.
As a warm-up fight, just to get rid of the cobwebs, I fight Alex Wasabi. Fuck it. Let me just go in, fuck him up, and then
redemption of the brother.
This is how you fucking do it.
A Jake Paul.
Alex Wasabi. The same Alex Wasabi that KSY's own brother fought and lost to. The same Alex Wasabi KSI mocked Deji for picking, saying it was too easy of a fight.
Who are you thinking about boxing next? Bitch, that guy's a bitch.
Yeah, Alex Wasabi.
Alex Wasabi.
Alex Wasabi.
You want to fight Alex Wasabi? Why? Who would want to see that? Better than Alex Wasabi. Alex Wasabi don't even know how to punch.
The same Alex Wasabi who had one fight, less than a year of training, and nowhere near KSI's level of experience. This was the guy KSI was calling his grand comeback fight, and then, by pure luck, Alex pulled out. This was KSY's chance to prove he wasn't just hype. He could have fought anyone with a real name, someone that actually made sense. But instead, he announced 2 fights in one night. Sounds impressive, right? Until you realize who he picked.
You heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. I, KSI, will be fighting 2 people on August the 27th. I am fighting Swarms and a Bulgarian boxer on the same night.
First, a fat rapper named Swarms, who had 2 weeks of boxing training. 2 weeks. Compared to KSI's 6 years.
Speed up, speed up, speed up. You've got 2 weeks left.
Hello. What do you mean they want the KSI thing? I've got 2 weeks. I've got to lose 10 kg. I learn how to box. Nah, man, you're taking a piss, man. Fuck this, man. Hold up, man. I'll call you back.
And the second fight? A Mexican journeyman, Luis Pineda, who had a losing record and was literally brought in to get knocked out. But here's the thing. If Jake Paul was out here sleeping athletes and MMA fighters in 1 or 2 rounds, then surely KSI, with this level of competition, was going to obliterate them in seconds. Right? Wrong. First up, Swarms. From the opening bell, it was clear this wasn't even a real fight. Swarms was terrified. He shelled up, ran for his life, and at one point was literally spinning in circles trying to escape KSI. It was Joe Weller all over again, and when KSI finally dropped him, it wasn't from a clean shot. Swarms lost balance and fell over. When he went down again in round 2, he wasn't even hurt. He sat there, smiling at his coach, and decided, yeah, that's enough for me. Another TKO, another opponent who barely threw back. And still, where was this power KS I kept talking about? Next, Pineda, another tailor-made opponent to make KSI look good. And yet, once again, it played out the exact same way. Pineda was scared, constantly running. And just like Logan in the rematch, was more focused on complaining to the ref than fighting. KSI dropped him multiple times, but just like Swarms, never actually hurt him. Another technical knockout. So after 3 years away, a new style. And all that talk about how easy Jake's fights were, KSI's big return was 2 guys who ran away from him, and even they lasted longer than they should have. If this was supposed to prove he was levels above Jake Paul, it did the opposite. But maybe that was just the warm-up. Maybe finally, KSI was going to step up and take on real competition. Right? KSI versus FaZe Temper. The narrative gets spun. Again, after KSI's 2-in-1 night showcase, his fans were desperate to see what was next. This was supposed to be the real comeback, the one that showed the world KSI was back to take over. The excuses were already made. Swarms and Pineda didn't count, it was just ring rust. Now, this was the fight that would silence the critics. And considering how much KSI criticized Jake Paul for getting rocked by Tyron Woodley, or how he called out Andrew Tate after bullying Pineda and Swarms, people expected something big. Maybe Woodley himself, maybe Tate, maybe even a real boxer like Joe Fournier, who KSI had been eyeing for months. But instead, the announcement came. Dillon Danis, a wrestler, known for terrible striking. A guy Jake Paul called out 4 years ago, but never actually fought because he wasn't worth it. And yet, somehow, the crossover boxing community, KSI's own employees, spun the narrative. People like the Gay Concept said this was KSI's version of Jake's Ben Askren fight. The hype was manufactured, and for a moment, people actually bought in. But then, Danis pulled out, and this was it. Destiny. The chance to finally see KSI in a real fight. Tyron Woodley, Andrew Tate, maybe even Joe Fournier. The big reveal was coming. Boom, FaZe Temper, a YouTuber with less than a year of boxing experience. 2 fights. A close win over King Kenny. And wait, it gets better. He got knocked out cold just months before on KSI's own event, Misfits 001 by Slim Albahur. And Slim wasn't even supposed to win. Think about that. The guy KSI was about to fight got knocked out faster than KSI beat Swarms and Pineda. But somehow, the gay concepts of the world framed this as an even better fight than Danis. Because at least he had boxing experience. Yeah, experience getting knocked out. So, on to the fight. The bell rings, round 1 starts, and KSI looks the exact same. Temper, to his credit, is actually landing. His height and reach are a problem, just like Logan Paul's were. But this time, KSI's opponent is finally fighting back. KSI gets more wild by the second, charging in recklessly, getting tangled in clinches, looking frustrated. Then something happens. KSI realizes his terrible version of traditional boxing isn't working. Stance. Starts bouncing, doing jumping jacks. And suddenly, he's in a karate-style approach. And then, boom. A straight right hook connects. Temper is out cold. KSI's first and only real knockout. But against someone with 5 years less experience who was coming off a brutal KO loss just months before. Make of that what you will. But now, there were no more excuses. KSI had to finally fight a real boxer. And so he did. His next opponent? A 41-year-old retired boxer, KSI versus Joe Fournier. The elbow heard around the world. At this point, the world was watching. KSI had the spotlight. And after his first mediocre performances, this was the moment to finally prove himself. So what would he do? Surely he wouldn't take on Joe Fournier, a 40-year-old retired boxer with no real relevance in the fight scene. This was career suicide if he did. Maybe finally we'd get the Tyron Woodley fight we were robbed of. Or maybe KSI wanted to step it up and fight someone new, like Andrew Tate, an ex-world champion kickboxer who's mega famous. Or what about Tommy Fury, the actual boxer who just beat Jake Paul, a fight KSI laughed at, saying he'd beat them both easily.
Don't mind me, just smoking on that Jake Paul pack. Honestly, Jake Paul, trash. Tommy Fury, trash. I stay winning! I stay winning, bitch!
And with KSI fresh off a viral win and Jake fresh off his first defeat, could this finally be the time they both cross paths? The polls were in. The announcement was here. Joe Fournier, a 40-year-old retired boxer. The gay concepts of the world were desperate, trying to spin some kind of narrative, trying to defend their boss. And what did they come up with? Well, if KSI beats Joe, he'll be the first crossover boxer to beat a pro. Even though Jake Paul fought an actual active boxer in Tommy Fury. Same age, height, weight, actually competing. I told you these guys are biased. I don't know how it worked either. Anyway, on to the fight. The fight starts. KSI comes out with shit fundamentals, as expected. The same wild swings, the same huge misses, the same clumpy, off-balance footwork. The first half of round 1, KSI does his usual bull rush, forcing Joe to shell up. But by the second, he abandons his boxing style and switches into his karate stance. He launches himself across the ring, throws a wild overhand. Joe clinches to recover, and then KSI shoves him off. A quick flurry, and deal. Next up, Tommy Fury. The only crossover boxer with a legit boxing background. The same man that beat Jake Paul. For the first time in his career, KSI was about to have a real fight. KSI versus Tommy Fury, the night the narratives died. For the first time, there was nothing to criticize. No need for the employees. No need for the narrative spinners. No need for damage control. The story wrote itself. KSI was taking on Tommy Fury. And on paper, this was even more impressive than Jake Paul's fight. Tommy had everything. And of course, his older brother, Tyson Fury, the heavyweight champion of the world, coaching him all the talk, all the memes. Now it was time. Would KSI walk the walk? Or was it all just talk? This was his ring of fire, his chamber of truth. The biggest event in crossover boxing history. The world was watching. KSI versus Tommy Fury. And on the co-main event, Logan Paul versus Dillon Danis. This wasn't just a big fight. This was the biggest card in crossover boxing history, and for the first time ever, the entire world's eyes were on KSI. The fight begins. KSI steps forward. The bell rings. Immediate aggression. He's bouncing. He's feinting. He's locked in. And then, boom, a perfect overhand right. His biggest shot, his most dangerous shot. The shot that separates him from everyone else. The reason he beats Jake Paul. The reason he beats anyone. The power, the powerhouse. The arena erupts. The commentary team screams. The crowd jumps to their feet. The camera pans to Tommy Fury. And nothing. Not a stumble, not a flinch, not even a reaction. Tommy Fury is still there, still standing, still staring at him. And just like that, the illusion is shattered. The fight plays out. From that moment on, it was just clinch after clinch. KSI looking awkward, scrappy, uncomfortable. Tommy Fury pressuring him, landing the cleaner shots. But KM thing he mocked Pineda for doing.
Into the ground. I'm like, bro, stop being a bitch, man. I'm so frustrated, bro. I'm there.
The same thing he made memes about. And just like Logan Paul before him.
Right now, this has to be it. They're going to do it. He absolutely is. And that's huge in a 6-round fight.
6 rounds later, with a point deducted. The aftermath. The tantrum frowned down upon the world. And this was the moment that broke KSI. A 30-year-old man who spent years mocking Jake Paul, laughing at others for losing, was now crying in front of millions, taking microphones, kicking screens, throwing a tantrum.
Yourself proud, my friend, and you will get the rematch and you'll win the rematch. Do you want that rematch? You've all been there, my friend. It's all bad.
I want it. You were ringside as well. You were commentating on the fight. You said ultimately, even though Tommy Fury won it, it was a loss because he said he was going to knock out. Control it, KSI, come on.
He's obviously very upset.
Dust settled. The murmurs quieted. KS, I was never retired. He just didn't know what to do next. First, there was the 2-in-1 night fight against Slim and Anthony Taylor. That got scrapped because of a hand injury. Officially, that was the reason. But let's be honest. Fans had already checked out. The hype was gone. People were tired of KSI fighting easy opponents, and suddenly the fight didn't seem worth it anymore. Then, out of nowhere, KSI was in talks to fight a retired soccer player. Yes, really. Wayne Bridge. 0 fight experience, no combat background, just another random name to add to KSI's highlight reel. But even that fell through. So, after all the talk, all the bravado, KSI ends up here, fighting Dillon Danis, a guy Logan Paul already clowned in the ring years ago. And the worst part? No one is impressed. This was a fight that was supposed to happen 3 years ago, and now it just feels empty. Even his own fans are struggling to act like this is some big challenge. But here's the real problem. This isn't just about the opponent. This isn't just about another fight that means nothing. This is about KSI himself. Because the one thing he always had, the one thing that kept him in these fights, is gone. And without it, KSI might not just lose this fight, he might already be finished. Motivation. It's crazy, right? KSI, this guy who once had a fire, a passion, an energy that made every fight feel like the most important thing in the world, is now a shell of that. A guy who used to scream, "I'm the nightmare," is now the daydream. And it's not just the spark that's gone. His motivation is slipping fast. Remember when KSI was hungry? His eyes locked in on his opponents, ready to prove the world wrong. Every press conference, every interview, he was calling out the big names, saying how much he wanted to be the best. He was always fired up, always pushing forward with this fire in his belly. Even if his skill wasn't always there, his heart and motivation carried him through. But now, it feels like all of that is gone. And here we are, on the edge of his fight with Dillon Danis in March. And it's a joke. KSI is supposed to knock out Dillon in 30 seconds, right? I mean, Dillon Danis is a joke. Everyone's expecting KSI to come out, deliver a big KO, and ride off into the sunset. But here's the thing. What if he doesn't show up like that? What if KSI is too far gone? What if, instead of the guy who was willing to put it all on the line, we're getting a guy who's just fighting to keep his business afloat? Yeah, I said it. The KSI we're seeing now isn't showing up for the fans. He's not showing up for the fight. He's showing up because Misfits boxing is his business. And without him in the ring, That thing is sinking fast. It's become less about proving himself and more about keeping the lights on. The problem? That motivation, the thing that carried him through all those past fights, is completely missing. He doesn't even care about the fight itself anymore. This isn't about legacy or glory. This is just KSI going through the motions because he's a prisoner to his own success. If he doesn't show up, his empire crumbles. So he's here. But it's not for the love of the sport. It's just to make sure Misfits keeps going. The KSI who beat Logan Paul or called out everyone and their mom, he's not walking into that ring against Dillon Danis. We're getting a version of KSI who's probably still riding the wave of his past success, but the fire's dimming, and that's a huge problem. So what happens when KSI shows up and doesn't perform? What happens if the motivation is simply gone and he just doesn't show up? Dillon Danis is shit, sure. But an unmotivated KSI, that's a recipe for disaster. And if KSI thinks he can coast through this fight, it's not going to be the easy victory, I think. In fact, it might be an embarrassing wake-up call. Is KSI even capable of showing up like he used to? Or has the money, the fame, the business just taken everything out of him? The real question here isn't if KSI can fight Dillon Danis, it's whether he even wants to. If he does want to, will the injury allow him? The injury. KSI's hand injury has been talked about ever since the Tommy Fury fight, but the truth is, it's not new. If you go back and look closely at his past fights, you'll see the signs. He's been dealing with this injury for a while now. After multiple fights, he's been caught clutching his hand, shaking it out, wincing in pain. Nobody talked about it.
Where does it hurt?
It was always there.
Sore, buddy.
Look, you're feeling down, but your mates want to give you some words of
Look, it was a really close fight. It was good. Oh, your eyes you got fucked up. Your eyes.
You did great, bro. You did great. Does your hand hurt? Looks like it hurts. I bet Logan's hand doesn't hurt.
And now? He's admitted the injury still isn't fully healed. This fight is only 4 weeks away. If it hasn't healed by now, will it really be better in time? If it's still giving him problems this late into camp, what does that say about his preparation?
Any reason for that?
So, my right hand is
From punching? Yeah. Okay, now that makes total sense.
Yeah.
We don't know how much it's actually limiting him, but let's be honest. He's not going to be training at full capacity if there's lingering pain. That's just common sense, and that's a problem. KSI's already changed his fighting style since his comeback, relying more on movement, feints, and blitzes rather than pure knockout power. Against Tommy Fury, we saw that karate-style stance, bouncing in and out, hesitant to plant his feet and throw with real venom. Now, add an injured hand into the mix. How does that impact his confidence in exchanges? Will he be even more reluctant to commit to his power shots? And when he does throw them, will they even have the same effect? If he's adjusting his punches to avoid pain, it could take even more steam off his shots. That's where things get interesting. Dillon Danis is a walking punch bag. Nobody expects him to put up a fight. The general expectation: KSI walks in, lands a big shot, knocks him out in under a minute. But if KSI's hand isn't 100%, if he's not able to train and throw punches the way he normally would, then what happens? Does this fight turn into a weird, awkward standoff? A low-output, hesitant fight where neither guy is really engaging? Or does Dillon, somehow, make it to the later rounds purely because KSI can't put him away the way everyone expects? And that's the real question. KSI is walking into this fight with an injury that hasn't fully healed, and that changes everything. If he struggles to get Danis out of there, people won't say it was because of an injury. They'll say he's washed. They'll say he's not the same fighter anymore. They'll say he never had power to begin with. So the real question isn't will KSI show up? It's will he show up as the fighter people expect? And if he doesn't, KSI that fought Joe Weller, Logan Paul twice, Swarms, and Pineda. This is the KSI that swings wildly, that squares up, that has no balance. And you know what all those fights have in common? None of them ended in a clean knockout. Now remember, KSI has to knock Dillon Danis out cold in one round. That's what everyone expects, even his biggest fans. If he doesn't, that alone is already a bad look. But just seconds in, you can see it. His movement is off. He's stiff. His feet are heavy. And when he throws a jab, Dillon blocks it with ease. And that's when the reality sets in. Dillon Danis, the joke of the fight world, the guy who Logan Paul embarrassed, finds KSI predictable. He's not landing clean shots. He's not walking through Dillon like he should. He's just there. The only time he lands is in the clinch with some sloppy body shots, and even those barely register. And then round 2 starts. KSI is frustrated. This isn't supposed to be hard. He comes out wild. Big looping punches just like the Logan rematch. But Dillon is in shock. This was supposed to be a joke of a fight. Now, it's turning into a nightmare. Round 6 starts, and KSI goes berserk, swinging wildly, trying to force the knockout. Just like the Logan rematch, he's throwing from every angle, hoping something lands. And then, he drops. Out of nowhere, KSI falls to his knees, clutching his right glove. The hand injury, the same injury that's been plaguing him since before the Tommy Fury fight. The ref gives him a count. He gets up. But from here, it's all clinch. The final seconds are nothing but a mess of tangled arms and desperation. The bell rings. And the decision, split decision. For Dillon Danis, KSI loses. To the easiest opponent of his career. And the entire world sits there in silence. A year ago, this was the guy who wanted to fight Jake Paul. Now, he just lost to a guy who throws fewer punches than a heavyweight in slow motion. KSI built his boxing career on proving people wrong. But this time, he'll prove them right. The nightmare will be over. But not in the way he wants. Outro. And there you have it. KSI versus Dillon Danis, if it even happens. Will KSI show up? And if he does, will it even be the same KSI? Or are we looking at a nightmare that's turned into nothing more than a daydream? But hey, if you made it this far, you clearly enjoyed the video. So do me a favor, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and let's make something happen. If this video hits 1 million views and we hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm calling out the Wade concept in my next video. Let's see if he has anything to say about that. Until next time, stay tuned.